So we do have, for example, Friday, we call it like our movie night. So movie night, eat out or eating, you know what to say,
eating.
Netflix and chill.
Okay,
so yeah,
baby number 3 on the
nope.
Because you're so used to not talking or spending that time together that your mind puts a block to say there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's not work, there's nothing else to talk about. So a lot of time I find myself talking about work.
If you're out offer the phone and you don't need to, don't.
Yeah, don't take the phone.
Work phone, no.
One thing I would tell you not to do, never use this work laptop, your personal laptop as a work laptop.
No.
Very bad idea. Because what tends to happen is even when I'm doing personal things, maybe booking holiday for my family, a ping comes in from work on that same laptop. And then I find myself drifting into work and doing work.
Because you just cannot ignore it sometimes. Yeah. Because your brain is telling you need to respond. What if it's urgent? What if it's important?
Hey Alpha, welcome to another Soul episode. Today, I'm here with
Taya.
And today we're going to be focusing on time management and how to balance work and family, okay? I know it's something that I struggle with. I know it's something that a lot of busy dads struggle with. So let's dive right into it. So welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
No worries. Okay, so first, I would like you to just introduce yourself to people in terms of what you do, your work, your commitment to the ministry, and everything, so that they understand how busy you really are.
So my name is Taya, married with 2 beautiful children. In terms of what I do, I work in the pharmaceutical industry. Varied, high-pressured, fast-paced company. One of the top ones, by God's grace. And also, what I do is quite pressurized in the sense that I work within the quality field and the validation field. So lots of people that have worked in the pharmaceutical industry, they can understand, particularly when it comes to time for inspections and things like that. So it does get really high tense and pressurized environment. From a ministry perspective, I do kind of head a few departments. I do have head, for example, the compliance department, which you're fully aware of, and many other departments like that. And also being a minister, in terms of what I do outside that, I do enjoy football.
Yes, he's actually very good at playing football.
One thing I would say, right, is I thought I would be a footballer. I was actually pursuing that football career, but it gets to a point where you just know you have to.
Your body's like, no.
I'm telling you. So it does get really busy, juggling work, church, wife, activities, extracurricular activities. So
Awesome. Well, I'm not going to take much of your time, so let's dive right into it.
Cool.
So how do you manage that? You've just told us about all the things that you do. So working in the ministry, the pressure of your job, and also sort of having a wife that I know demands some of your time, and your children that I know for sure demand some of your time.
Yeah.
How do you find a way to balance the career, your ministry, and your family?
It's not easy. From experience, I think one thing experience has taught me is, I won't say the hard way, but I've learned my share amount of lessons, and from that, reflecting back now, sometimes it's good, because I could easily say to you, this is how you want to manage your time, but you probably won't take it and go, oh yeah, it's just one person, one podcast, just someone's idea. But sometimes when you learn from experience, you reflect and like, oh yeah, I need to do things differently. So how do I manage that? It's an incredible challenge. But what I do now is I'm more intentional with what I do. I actually know when to stop, when to just walk away, when to, prioritize things, and sometimes when to go, you know what, I've had enough. You know what, I need to put family first. You know what, I need to put this first. Just putting the right pegs in the right hole at the right time.
Right. Okay. So when you mentioned being intentional, I think that's a very key idea that I think a lot of people need to subscribe to. So being intentional. I remember there was a point in time where I had a lot of complaints from my wife that I'm not spending enough time with them. At the time, we only had one son. And I was really busy with work. So what I did in terms of being intentional was I actually created a calendar and I scheduled time with my son, my family, and time with work. So I was trying to be intentional. So, for example, I would have from 5 p.m. Family time to maybe 6, 7, 8. From 8 p.m. sort of me time where I try to do other ventures or whatever. But what I found out was that didn't work. So I didn't stick to it long enough. I even set alarms and all of that, but it just did not work. Would you say that was the right approach in terms of creating a calendar, or would that just be over the top?
Now that you mentioned that, I'm thinking probably something I want to try. As a matter of fact, because the one thing, because we're all uniquely wired and different in our own various ways. some things might work for someone, it might not. You said it hasn't really worked, but it might work for myself. So that's why sometimes you have to kind of practicalize and pick one of these, pick bits here and there. So it's something I might try. But in terms of why it hasn't worked for you, I don't know, because there might be some other conflicting priorities, other conflicting situations, circumstances. But what we do is kind of similar, but not rigid as such. So we do have, for example, Friday, we call it like a movie night. So movie night, eat out or eating, what to say,
eating.
Netflix and chill.
Okay, so right. Baby number 3 on the
way. No. So what we tend to do is that moment in time, we stay together. And one thing I've done now is, maybe because of time and age, is kind of cut down on certain activities. Football, less of football, because there were times where I could play almost every single week. But there's the age factor, and there's also certain priorities. Because like you said, women are not being stereotypical. They do demand your time, and rightly so, because we do demand for their time as well. Because sometimes we get caught up in, oh yes, we have to do this, we have to do that. But to come back to your point, is just trying to manage the situation as it comes. You have to be flexible in your approach. Not every Friday, because sometimes we do have events whereby you can't make that Friday. And my wife would say to me, when do we spend time as a family? So it's about, sitting back and say, what, look at the calendar. What can we move around? What can we be flexible with? And when can we, next week, Saturday, we've got this event. Is it important? Can we move it, or can we make some flexible arrangement? And we walk around it and we spend the time together. In spending time together, what I've learned is you don't have to necessarily go out. You don't have to go eating. You don't have to go holidays. She's been, she's been on my case. No. She's been on my case on that, but now I'm making more effort. And this is all part of time management and also resource management, because you have to be able to juggle both together. There's a time for everything.
I'm going to stay around the topic of being intentional. So there was something else that you said that I'm going to sort of touch on a bit later on.
Okay.
An example of that, and I think it's so key, is that myself and my wife, we decided to do something that she introduced. So usually I get carried away with the work of the day. So especially with my actual and a 9-to-5 job or whatever. And then she would say, you know what, we should have like a 10 minutes each day dedicated. Basically disrupt your flow, disrupt your rhythm. Let's have 10 minutes where we just spend that 10 minutes together. And in that 10 minutes, we're probably just sitting down, looking at each other, and we just start to find things to discuss. Because oftentimes what happens is when I'm too busy and I find myself not spending enough time with them, we start to lose out on what to talk about, right? It's not as flowy as it would usually be. And then, there's a lot of things we can update each other about, but what usually happens is that because you're so used to not talking or spending that time together, that your mind puts a block to say there's nothing to talk about. Do you know what I mean? If it's not work, there's nothing else to talk about. So a lot of time I find myself talking about work. So I think that 10 minutes, really did help our relationship. It sort of brings a disruption to your day to say, hey, okay, it's time for me and maybe that's something that you could perhaps try.
For myself, I think sometimes we have to stretch beyond our boundaries and our limits in terms of our mental capacity. And the reason being is, yes, naturally, because we live together, you do talk about so many things, and at some point you run out of things to talk about. But sometimes I find myself talking about things that, you can call it a fantasy, you can just pluck ideas from somewhere, scenarios, play different scenarios. Myself and my wife, we might say, what would you do if, let's say, for example, we had £1 million, even though there's nothing, it's not something that really occurred at that particular time, but it's something to bring about conversation. Then from there, there might be a slight different conversation that shoots off that. So I think sometimes we have to go beyond our boundaries as such to stretch, our mental capacity, stretch what we think, okay, just look at possibilities and envision things and just stretch our imagination. I think that's one thing we tend to do a lot, because we put different scenarios. What if, or what about this? If we do this, have you ever thought about this? So I think it's something that we should do. We just have to do everything within reason, because sometimes when your brain starts to over fantasize, and then you lose track of reality, because then you're long gone and such. So yes, in terms of being intentional, you can be intentional. You can be intentional in the things you say, in the things you do. And one caveat I would say to people is that there are bits from the things I'm saying that we can apply, and some of them might not work, to be honest with you. But however, you can even something else can stem out of it that might work as well. And that's the whole point of exploring things, stretching your imaginations.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's one thing that I'm going to try, stretching the imagination. I think I'm too much of a realist when it comes to the conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure, my wife doesn't like the fact that I'm saying, short answers, I'm fine, I'm good. Maybe I could stretch it a bit more.
Yes. And it's difficult because it depends on the way you're brought up, because some of us, we can be very concise, very apt and succinct and just say, yes, this, that. But I guess it goes both ways in terms of you have to be intentional in saying, okay, you know what? And it'll be good to have a reflective moment and having that conversation, just reflect, how is the conversation going? There are some conversations that you get to a dead end, and once it gets to a dead end and you're both just there staring at each other. Nothing wrong in having to, if you've got kids, for example, get your kids into the conversation, get them talking. Before you know it, they say something that makes you giggle, and then you start going, can you believe what you said? And then something just kind of clicks and you go, oh yeah, something happens, and then your brain is juggled and things like that, your memory.
Okay, I'm going to ask some statistics questions. Right?
Yes.
So roughly, let's say you have the ministry, you have work, you have family time, and let's not forget that it's also important to have you time, right?
Yes.
So those are 4 things and probably maybe you have family things like extended family, maybe favors that you have to do. So that's potentially 5 things, but let's stick it to 4.
Yeah.
Or let's stick with 4. So what would you say the percentage? So if you were to split your time in percentage, what would be the percentages of all those 4 things? So ministry, work, family, and youth time. What would you say right now it is?
So I would say in terms of percentages, because in a day you have 24 hours.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, I spend 8 hours at work. And within that, because of where I work currently, I spend like 3 hours on the road. So that's like 11 from 24, that's about 13 hours. Within that 13 hours, I would say I probably spend about 6 hours sleeping.
That's 50% of your day.
Yes. So that's 50% already for work. And you spend the other time sleeping, which is roughly about 25%.
25, 30, yeah.
Yeah, 25%. So the other 7... It looks lower than I thought.
But that's the truth, because that's the reality of things.
Yes, it's the reality.
That's the reality of things where...
So I say from that 13, I spend with my wife, because you have to count sitting down to eat and have a conversation, particularly at night when the children have gone to bed. So let's say 3 hours. And for the children, let's say the remaining 3 hours, because you have to look at you birthing them and stuff. So then you're only left to like 1 hour
for yourself.
And within that 1 hour for yourself, you still have to have your bath or shower, brushes.
Yeah.
So pretty much you're left with no time. So in breaking that down, so we'll say roughly 40% for work. Sleeping time, let's exclude that from the time, because that's like 25%, because there's nothing you don't break down. So 40, 25, that's like 75 already. 65. So you're left with 35.
Yeah.
So from that 35, let's say you've got 15, and you're then left with 5 for yourself. So rather than 15, let's say 12 for your wife, 12 for your children, and the remaining. So wow, it's something I've never sat down to look at.
I think that's not, a lot of people don't tend to sit down and look at it statistically. I would probably say that work probably takes about 40% of my time as well.
Yeah.
I would then say that maybe family time probably takes about 10 to 15% of the time. I'll probably say, if I say family time, so my wife and my children, I'll probably then put it together and say 30%.
Yeah. That means you're actually doing better than myself.
No, but you split it up. You had a split. You said
12, and another 12. That's like 24%.
Yeah, roughly 30%. So it's probably around the same time as you. The me time, where it's my me time is more of me working, but not my actual work. It's other kind of work. Probably takes the other bigger part of that. I tend to only get, I think, a maximum of 6 hours sleep a day. So, sometimes I get 4, but I know that that's not healthy. No one should do that.
No.
I'm changing. I'm working on that. And by working on that, it's like what you said, intentional.
Yeah.
Being intentional. So I'm saying, okay, by this time I need to be in bed. By this time I tend to wake up around the same time, because obviously doing school runs and stuff. So, okay, let's talk more about work.
Yeah.
And the stress of work. How do you manage where you have two sort of opposing, or not necessarily contradictory, but opposing forces? For example, you are highly stressed at work. At the same time, once you come home, you hear daddy, 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 mommy, daddy, 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 and then babe, 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 all of these different things. How do you sort of manage that where you don't let the work aspect of things? So, sometimes some of us take work home. So you don't let that sort of mess with the time that you're supposed to spend with your family. So leaving work at work and focusing on family once you get home.
It's interesting that you say that, because this is why I said sometimes you learn from experience. So I was very privileged. At some point, I worked in a role that to some degree was to some senior level. And within that role, you get given a laptop to take home. You get a phone. If you're offered a phone and you don't need to, don't.
Yeah, don't take the phone.
Work phone, no. So in a sense that having a phone, your laptop, any pings, particularly with Teams, any pings, you can hear it. And it's a scheme that makes you know what? Because humanly speaking, you don't want to ignore it. The work is pressurized, particularly the role whereby you're required to make certain key decisions. I remember during that role, it wasn't really helpful for the family, because I was spending a lot of time, because you needed to prove yourself. You need to challenge yourself and show that, you're worth the payroll, you're worth the check. So it was a bit challenging. It meant that spending more time doing work stuff, sometimes not being able to separate, work from being at home, from family. And you find yourself, even when you're at home, you'll see me on the laptop trying to get work done. And it kind of stretched the family, the family aspect of it, in terms that there was less time to spend with family, less involvement and interaction. And then it wasn't really helpful. It wasn't really good. So I ended up resigning from the role, because sometimes you have to, this is where time management comes in, and also kind of understanding what your priorities are, because I had to resign. What I did was I reflected, and, I had a conversation with my wife, and we thought, you know what, let's spend more time, because of the work, the pressure that comes with it, to say, okay, without spending time with kids, not getting to spend more time with my son, with my wife, rightly so resigned. And then since then decided that whatever role I was going to take next, I have to make sure that is there a work phone, being able to separate that work, know that once you finish your time, for example, if I finish at 4, that's you done. So I'm done at 4, I don't have to take it. Sometimes the business do require, based on business priority and urgent needs, but if it cannot be done during working hours, you have to be able to emphasize that. And what I now do now actually is my out of office. Anytime I set out of office, I say out of office is strictly family time. I'm not reachable. Some people go, oh, there might be delay in response, but it's strictly family time. And I learned that based on one of my, the people I worked with, one of the managers, senior managers, and that's what is written there. It's family time. Once it's family time, spend it with family. So, and that's what I've kind of imbibed now, in the sense that if there's a conflicting interest between work and family, work will come and go. You could be sacked in the twinkle of an eye, and that's it gone. An incident happened where I was just, someone shared with me, someone who had worked in that company for several years, and just like that, an error, and it was sacked. So from something very minor, but then your family will still be there with you. Too thin and thick and thin, it will be there with you. So understanding that what's going to stay, what would stay, what's important, and that's family. Work just keep changing.
I mean, I completely agree with you. So that's another thing that we need to maybe keep in mind: priorities, right?
Yes.
Prioritizing family over work, although work might continue to take the majority of the time,
because you need the money
for the family. You need the money for the family, for sure. I'm pretty sure my children are not complaining when they get their ice cream.
No.
And when my wife shops, that she's not complaining.
No.
So work is absolutely necessary. But I think understanding the priorities. So the expectation is that after work, it's family time. So work should not intrude on family time. You've already given it the better time. And one thing that you did mention that I found interesting was reflection. So there is that period of reflection that needs to happen. And I think you said that you resigned. Like, what about do?
It was both. It wasn't an easy decision. But it was also good for the family aspect of it. The mental, because the moment you start you bring work into your family, into your home, to some degree, what you're doing is you're adding added pressure on not just yourself, but you're adding pressure on your kids, you're adding pressure to your wife, and the environment becomes pressurized. And once it gets that, then there's a lot of tension. So it was a decision that had to be made. And bearing in mind as well, you have to make calculated risk. It was a risk that, okay, yes, if I resign, I have this notice period. And within that notice period, I need to make sure I secure something. It might not be at that particular level, but at least something that ticks you going and then makes you pay. You have to look at the financial aspect of it.
How did you manage that? Were you able to find something within the notice period?
so just slightly after,
right?
But it wasn't something of the same level,
right.
Which was actually good because then you become yourself again. It wasn't of the same level.
Yeah.
The pay was. Let's talk about the pay. I know a lot of you want to guess the pay, but in terms of the responsibility aspect of it, it wasn't as much as that. But the pay was still within the same bandwidth, I would say. The other thing that he required was extra additional traveling time as well, which is something that one of the things you have to do. But mentally, for your mental health and mental state of mind, and also for your family's mental health and mental state of mind, and you enjoy the benefit of it once you manage your time and you manage your work, your work balance, work-life balance. You enjoy the benefit of it because you come home, you're relaxed and refreshed to go the following day to work. And this is just Monday to Friday. Then I could find myself weekends as well on the laptop and stuff like that. So,
I mean, for sure. That is super powerful. Super powerful. You mentioned that you had to basically quit your job.
Yeah.
Right? So what was it that got you to that point to say, you know what, it's not worth it? I need to find something else that would help me sort of better balance my life, work life, and also my family life. And one tip that you did say that I'm going to forever take with me, that I hope people take with them, is if you don't absolutely need a work phone, don't take it. Because it's almost like a trap, right?
Yeah,
they can call you at any time on the work phone, and you find yourself just working.
If you can avoid laptop, just use desktop. If you can. So going back to your question again, because I noticed I was losing control of my time, because work was eating into the family time. It was eating into, your church time. It was into, your ministerial time. It was just creeping in slowly. And before you know it, you lose track of time. So, and it got to a point whereby there wasn't that time anymore, and the time wasn't sufficient. So that was the moment of realization. And then you go, and then you feel that you feel it even yourself mentally, that you get to a point that you just cannot stop. You cannot stop. Once you're sleeping as well, some of you might, you might probably resonate. Once you sleep, you're thinking about work. Even when you're relaxed, when you're supposed to relax your mental health and your mental state of mind, you're just thinking about it, thinking about your decisions, questioning your decisions and things like that. And at that moment, yes, it's becoming unhealthy for you, especially if you cannot control time, and time is just limited.
I was there a few years ago where I was literally working 24 hours. So, because one thing I would tell you not to do, never use this work laptop, your personal laptop, as a work laptop.
No.
Very bad idea. Because what tends to happen is, even when I'm doing personal things, maybe booking holiday for my family, a ping comes in from work on that same laptop. And then I find myself drifting into work and doing work.
Because you just cannot ignore it sometimes. Because your brain is telling you need to respond. What if it's urgent? What if it's important?
So what I'm getting from that, from what you've been saying, is, number one, we need to be intentional. Number two, we need to be reflective. But also, it's just as important to set boundaries. Like set physical boundaries. So boundaries like, no, I'm not taking a phone. No, I'm not using my personal laptop for work. Or maybe, actually, I would rather use a desktop than taking a work laptop home. So being vocal enough to set those boundaries. And
knowing when to walk away as well, because sometimes you just need to walk away, because that's for your own good. If it's something, if it gets to a point whereby you can manage, but it's getting to a point whereby you feel like you're starting to burn out. Know when to just stop and walk away.
And maybe another thing to add to that is, and I got it from what you were saying before, was setting expectations. So a lot of times when you go to interviews with a job, so we're tackling work because that takes the bulk of the time. It's good to just set expectations. Like, when they say introduce yourself, and a lot of people just talk about their professional life and, these are the things that I've achieved, which are great things, right? But, let them also know that you're a family man. Say, I'm a husband to a wife. I have 2 children, so that they can set the expectation that you're not going to be like, you're going to be great at your work. Of course, that's what, we are expected to do. But I also do have a family that I have to sort of prioritize as well. So it's important to maybe, that's a tip for people to introduce this and let people know that you have other priorities too.
I agree. And I think if you're looking for a job, one thing you need to consider is work-life balance. Understand the culture of the place you're going to. If the culture does not permit you to, does not respect your family time, I think it's the wrong place to work. I think it's the wrong job as well. I think there's a lot of emphasis on mental health now, which is good, creating that awareness. So, like you said, I do wear my ring anytime I go for an interview. It's just so they know, yes, I'm committed. I might not necessarily go into details in terms of, married with kids. I might not necessarily, but sometimes they do ask the question. We've noticed you moved in few roles and tell them, for family reasons to be closer to family. And I know some people who haven't got a family. I know the platform is more for the dads, and for people who are thinking of, becoming a dad, etc. I think it's just something to consider. Right now, once you're single, you can think, yes, you can manage. But trust me, when the wife, the missus comes in, the child comes in.
Oh my! So, when I was still a bachelor, I'd say I was unfailingly going to the gym 6 days a week.
Yes,
maybe too much, but 6 days a week, and I would spend about 1.5 hours to 2 hours at the gym, almost religiously every single day. I got married. That dropped to maybe 3 days a week. And I would go to the gym for 1 hour. The children came into the picture, and I was zero time for the gym. Now I'm over here trying to find workouts to do at home. That's how much time they take, and which is why it's very important for us to be able to be intentional, set boundaries, and reflect on our life and situation,
and know when to just take a break, take a stop, and walk away. The one thing I would say as well is some situations are different. There are some people whereby they haven't got that. They don't work, for example. Some people, they don't have kids. Some people, and it's different because the distribution or allocation of time might be slightly different because based on your scenario or your situation. But where your situation is a bit different, where you're on the extreme side of it with work demand, with ministerial demand, family demand, etc. This is where you have to make sure you allocate and make sure the time allocation is correct, and understanding and setting those goals and boundaries, and making sure, yes, you know when to just pull the plug.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned ministerial as well. How do you manage that? So, there's a lot of times from experience where you there's a lot of tasks from church.
Yeah.
A lot of, if you're part of one department or one team or whatever, that can also come with its own. I was reading the book of Proverbs the other day, where it was basically saying, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. How do you balance saying, oh, this is God's work, this is work for God? It needs to be prioritized, to saying, okay, let me actually, do I prioritize my family over that?
See, it's an interesting concept because in the sense that part of your God's mandate is your family. It's part of your God's mandate because your family is a mandate, because the Bible says as Christ is the head of the church, so is the husband, etc. And the Bible puts a lot of emphasis on home because home is important in your upbringing, in the way you train up a child, because that's one of the mandates from God. So in terms of when it comes to God, one of the factors, the way I do it is knowing fully well that your family is a God-directed, responsibility as well, is understanding what's priority. There are some tasks within the church that can be delegated. Someone told me about a book. It's called Busy. A very good book for learning how to delegate stuff. So understanding what can be delegated, understanding, okay, what can wait, and understanding that there are some things whereby you cannot, you have to be, you have to lead. Those kind of things are a bit different because, okay, do you have the right resources or the right time to do it? If you think you haven't got the necessary people that can do it, or that their skill set or their expertise or their level of ministerial commitment or anointing that can do that kind of certain things, then that means you have to do it yourself. But while you're doing that, there are other bits whereby you can delegate. So from a church, from a God's perspective, and also from a family perspective, understanding that the way I see it, like as in God being the head, but however, your family life and your family commitment and mandate is part of your responsibility given by God. So you need to be able to work it out, work it out, understanding, because if you think about it as well, the things of God, depending on if you're heading a department, it depends on if you're just a church member, if you're just a church member, or maybe your prayer life, etc. So, but what a lot of people say most of the time, and what they do is they put a lot of emphasis on, on their commitment to the things of God, forgetting that the family aspect of it is also part of your mandate. And if you spend so much time and you neglect your family, you can basically, it's the same with Eli, because if Eli had spent some time training the children, Ophni and Phinehas, what he would have done is that ministerial duty would have carried on. But because he neglected one of God's mandate, he's like when he says neglecting this one, he neglected that, and that kind of just put a stop to that responsibility that could have carried on from generations to generations. So we just have to be mindful that in the bid to do the things of God, we should not forget the mandate, the family mandate, which God has also given to us.
And you pointed out something, the story of Eli, right?
Yeah.
I think this is why time management and finding work-life balance is super important, especially when you have children.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the time you're not spending with the children is time they're spending with something else.
Yes.
So if it's not with the TV, it's going to be with their friends. If it's not with their friends, now all of these different things or whatever they spend their time, it would be the things that influences them.
Yeah.
So if you spend little time with them, you're not going to be influencing them as much as somebody that is spending more time with them. Yeah. So spending time with children, spending time with your wife, having that work-life balance helps you to shape your family.
Yeah, just to touch on what you said, that influence is important because you feel like you're not spending the time with your children. You've given them the TV or whatever devices they've got, or just playing around. But influence is also time management because this time you spend with your children, what you're doing is you're impacting knowledge, you're impacting discipline, you're impacting some level of responsibility, even understanding. For example, what we do in our house is we have a weekly routine. Our son knows what he's meant to do on Monday. He knows what he's meant to do on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. So if you ask him what is it for Monday, he knows what he does for Monday. He knows for Tuesday. He knows he has a routine. He knows once he gets home, once he wakes up, he knows his prayer. Then once he's had his own quiet time, he comes and says, "Can we have a devotion?" Yeah. Then he knows that he's not allowed to do anything until that's done. Then he can then go and build his train track, etc. School days, he goes to school. He knows once he comes in, he knows his routine. And getting them, those influences, to some degree, you're instilling some level of responsibility. You're instilling some level of influence that would also help them in understanding and in time management because he knows that there's a time that is allocated for certain things.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. Because of time, I'm going to just wrap up now. But before we do that, we've learned, I think I've learned personally a lot of great things from your personal experience.
Yeah, I'm same here as well. I've learned I'll still try that, put the time slot with my wife.
when she saw the calendar, because our calendars are linked. Yeah. So it popped up on her phone, time to spend time with her. Babe, what do you mean you're putting me on the calendar? So it didn't go down too well. I would not advise it, but you can do a try.
Yeah, I'll actually give you the time. Yeah. I think a try. I think it's just... Because sometimes you can be intentional, but at the same time, while being intentional, you get sidetracked there.
For sure.
It might not work, but it's something to take home for me as well. I'll probably speak with my wife.
Yeah, you're going to try the 10 minutes per hour. You know, if it's something that you can do based on your schedule, where it just pulls you off from whatever. Let's just spend this 10 minutes strictly together. That would be something I'll ask you to try. But for myself and everybody else that's listening and watching, what are the top 3 tips or top 3 things that needs to be considered or needs to be practiced in order to have a good work-life balance?
Priority. When it comes to priority, it's what's important, what needs to happen, what needs to stay, what is just nice to have. I think priority is key. Being able to prioritize. If you prioritize your family, for example, the God factor is also important. And the next thing is the support system. The support system you have is very crucial. It's very helpful. For example, I forgot the car seat for my daughter in the car, and I had to just call my brother to say, you know what, can you pick it up for me? Can you help with doing the school runs? So that support system does help because to some degree, it kind of takes out certain things whereby you think, oh yeah, you have to do. So the support system is key. I think another thing I would say is understanding rather what you can delegate. Yeah. So I call them the delegatables.
You're very good at it. What was the book you said you read? Busy.
Busy, yeah. Busy is a good book.
Who, or
I can't remember.
Okay.
Busy is a good book. So I've been understanding what you can delegate. And the last thing I would say is the availability in terms of resource and time. If there is one thing you should take home is that time is there is never time, really. It's not sufficient. Yeah. It's not sufficient. One thing I've learned is don't look at time. Because the moment you start looking at time, you feel pressure. Don't look at time, but plan your time based on what you can control. So don't look at time, but plan your time based on what you can control.
How do you not look at time, but still plan your time based on what you can control?
Because if you start thinking, oh yes, time is going. I need to do this. Time is going. Oh, you have time. But what you do is, what can I control in terms of the resources I have, in terms of what I can delegate? This is what I can control. For example, my emails. I don't check my emails every day. I don't. Even though I get pings on my phone, I don't. I actually have dedicated days whereby I have to check my emails. Then that's when I check my emails. My WhatsApp, if you check my WhatsApp, not all messages are read. I just, basically, because I cannot control these certain things. So I wait for this to the point where, yes, I can control. So I plan my time based on what I can control and influence. But if it's at a point where I cannot control, yes, it can wait. It can be a back burner. Or you know what? Just shook it in a bin.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at it. If you keep looking at time, the time will never be enough. 24 hours, sometimes it's not enough in a day.
And you cannot control the time.
No,
someone said something to me once and said that if you try and do all the work of this week in one day, what work do you have the next day?
No.
If you try and do 2-3 days work in one day, what work do you have in the next day? So it's better sometimes to just plan your work and not spend like 24 hours on it today, and then tomorrow you're like, oh, what am I going to do? You're going to find yourself doing other work. It could work in the sense that you do it here and then tomorrow you can focus on family, but it's better to just have a well-balanced day each day.
And I know what's urgent. Some things can wait. Some things that can wait doesn't have to be done. So if something can wait, fine. Let's say wait. It's just if it's not important, do you even need to waste your time on that? Just let it go. Just put it somewhere.
Yeah. Let me share this, and then we would. I'll give a summary, and then we'll end.
All right.
So one thing that I learned from listening to some other podcasts, one of them is My First Million. So they talk about this one big thing, right? And the idea is that each day, when you start off planning your day, and you have this one big thing that you must complete at work that day. So if you don't do anything else, but you do that one big thing, it's already a successful work day. So I tend to then say, okay, one big thing and 3 supplementary things. So if I complete the one big thing, maybe in 1 hour, the 3 supplementary things, if I completed them as well, that's great. If I should also be content with saying, okay, once I finish that one big thing, work has been successful. So I think if we bring that into getting a good balance with family and work and ministry, we should always try and think, okay, what's that one big thing? Once I finish that one big thing, okay, maybe I could spend more time with family. And in summary, what we've discussed today, there were maybe 3 things that jumped out to me. Number 1, being intentional. I think a lot of people are not as intentional as they should be. Number 2, setting clear boundaries between work, family life, and also ministry or whatever you do, letting everybody know and setting yourself clear boundaries. And number 3, most people don't think of this, but reflection. Be aware. Be aware of what time you spend with your family. Be aware of what time that you're spending at work. Be aware of the time you're spending in ministry and everything, because that would help you to realize, okay, there is something wrong here. And sometimes maybe put it down in statistics.
Just like we did. So just like, the first 2020, but breaking it down, you realize, however, it might be different during the weekdays. Weekends might be slightly different because other things comes in, which is the ministerial aspects of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great having you. So please remember to like, to subscribe, to share. Here, this is Project Alpha. We are here to help you spend and maximize the little time that you have for yourself. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Enjoy.